Today I'm going to show you how to fix your stiff hips. What's going on, guys? Blake here at GuerrillaZen Fitness. The hips are a ball and socket joint just like the shoulders, and they're very mobile just like the shoulders are. Just like any joint, if you're missing mobility there, you need to be working on enhancing the mobility of that area by doing joint mobilizations. It's also very important to be activating your muscles in the new ranges of motion that you've acquired after you do any kind of flexibility or mobility training. Simply put, if you don't actually teach your neuromuscular system how to control the new range of motion that you've unlocked through doing a joint mobilization, that actually can be dangerous. Now your joint can go into these ranges of motion that you have no control over. And also, if you do not activate your muscles after you do a joint mobilization, the mobility won't really last very long because you're not teaching your body how to actually use that range of motion and lock it in and make it permanent. Today I'm going to show you a couple stretches and mobilizations for the hips, and then I'm going to immediately show you the proper activations that you can do right after them to combat most range of motion issues that we see in the hips, all right? This approach is going to combine increasing the range of motion and then teaching your body how to utilize that range of motion, which is really the most effective approach. All right, let's get right into it. One of the first mobilizations that I'm going to show you today is an internal rotation mobilization for the hips. Basically, this increases your capacity to turn your femur, twist it inwards towards the midline of your body, internally rotate it, okay? Many people have restricted internal rotation of their hips, and that's a big issue. It can affect your ability to squat properly and activate your glutes and many other things, okay? So if you find that your hips are really stiff and they can't internally rotate like this, here's a very simple mobilization that you can do. You sit on your butt, kind of, spread your legs out like this, pull your toes up towards your shin and gently dip the leg down like this, okay? What's happening at the femur is it's internally rotating as we do this, okay? You can alternate on each side. And, you always want to remember the phrase, motion is lotion. When you're doing a joint mobilization like this, it's not about holding it deep and pressing really hard like it is a stretch. It's simply about doing this for repetitions. It's all about volume. How much motion can you produce in the joint, all right? This is a really good way to internally rotate the hips and start to restore the capacity of the hips to internally rotate. A couple things to keep in mind with this. This can be very hard on the knees. I've showed this in the past, and I always want to put that message out there. If this does not feel good on your knees, if you don't have knee issues, or if you do have knee issues rather, don't do this. This is going to torque the knee kind of a lot. Pulling the toes up towards the shin helps to activate some of these dorsiflexor muscles here, which can kind of help to stabilize the knee a little bit. So that's a big critical component of this, pulling the toes up towards the shin as you're dipping the leg down. That's really important to do. However, if this is bothering you and you're worried about your knees, just simply don't do this. Move right to the activation, which I'll now show you at this point in time, all right? So remember, anytime we acquire new range of motion, we always want to activate and teach our muscles how to utilize that new range of motion, all right? One of the most simple ways to do that after we've done a hip internal rotation mobilization is to lay down, all right? You can either put a ball or a foam roller between your legs. Mine's over there right now. I don't really feel like grabbing it. You can also just stack two fists on top of each other, kind of put them in between your knees and just rest your knee, your top knee on top of your fist there. What you're gonna do is you're gonna lift the heel up towards the ceiling and then come back down, all right? This is the same motion that we just made. However, now we're actually using the muscles of the hip, like the gluteus medius, to internally rotate that femur, all right? Now, we're actually teaching the body how to utilize that new range of motion that we just unlocked, okay? Obviously for that, how many of reps you do on one side, you also want to do the other side. I'd recommend, 2 sets of 15 to 20, all right? For the mobilizations, I'd recommend anywhere between 20 and 30 reps on each side. This is great to throw into your leg warm-ups if you find that you have issues with, internal rotation before you do squats, deadlifts, something like that. All right, another common range of motion that the hip is missing is the ability to extend. Hip extension occurs when the angle at the hip joint is widening, all right? Basically when your hip is straightening out. Every time you walk and your leg goes back behind you, that leg is going into extension. Anytime you're in a deep squatted position and you come up, you're extending your hips. Anytime you stand up out of a chair, you're extending your hips. It's very important. It's also very important that you have the capacity to do this at the hip in order for the glutes to fire, okay? And if you're like a lot of people, you have tight hip flexors and you basically need to be opening up the hips and working on your extension, all right? I've showed this many times as well, but basically to do that, what you're gonna do, start in this classic hip flexor stretch position, one knee down, one knee out in front. I like to put my hands on my knee like this. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna rock forward, squeezing the glute really hard on this side and squeezing your core too. You don't wanna be tilting the pelvis forwards like this, okay? You wanna keep your pelvis almost tucked underneath you, kind of your lower back flat. Squeeze the glute on this side, shift the hips forwards, okay? You're gonna feel a nice opening here, all right? What I want you to do is actually do this for reps, okay? We're kind of treating this more like a mobilization as opposed to a static stretch. I don't want you just coming into this position and holding it for a long period of time. You can do that if you want, but you know, today we're kind of focused on producing motion at the hip joint, right? So we want to do about 15 to 20 reps of that on each side. It's really important that you're squeezing the glute as you do that. So by doing that, we are increasing the capacity of the hip to extend. And now, of course, congruent with today's theme, we're going to do an activation, all right? You kind of get a little bit of an activation with that because you're squeezing the glute, but a great thing to pair with any kind of hip extension mobilization or stretch is an active hip extension exercise, like hip bridges, like this, where you're squeezing your glutes really hard at the top. You should find, I should say, that doing this after mobilizing the hips and restoring extension adds a little bit of height to your hips when you're doing this, and maybe even a little bit more increased capacity to actually squeeze your glutes and feel them working, okay? 2 sets of 20 of the hip bridges is a great thing to stack with any kind of hip extension, stretch, or mobilization that you're doing. All right, so another thing that is not as common as missing internal rotation or extension, but we do see it a little bit, is missing hip flexion, which is the capacity to decrease the angle at the hip. Basically, to pull the knee into the chest, like this. Your femurs can be positioned in the socket like this anytime you're doing squats, okay? When you squat down, your knees come up towards your chest, and you need to have the capacity to do this comfortably. This is something that I have to work on personally a lot. One of the ways that I like to stretch the hip into deep flexion is like this. You plant the foot out in front of you like you're gonna be doing a squat. Try to extend this other leg back as far as you can. And what you're gonna do here, try to maintain, structural integrity throughout your spine, a nice straight spine. And try to bring your elbows down to the floor here. You see how deeply flexed this left hip joint is when I'm doing this? Okay, you don't want to be rounding your back too much, okay? Try to keep your chest up, back straight. And you can hold this as a static stretch for about 30 seconds. You can even kind of pump your body up and down like this to make it more of a mobilization, right? Actively coming into flexion and a little bit less flexion. More flexion, a little bit less flexion, okay? You can even plant your foot up on a box and do this even more deeply than what I'm showing you now. That is a great thing to do on both sides. And again, congruent with today's video, now we want to work on actually activating the hip flexors after we do that, okay? We want to restore that range of motion and then teach our body how to use it, okay? For this, I just like holding on to something like this, holding onto a wall for stability, keeping this leg in a partially flexed position, but then flexing it even more, like this, all right? Partially flexed, fully flexed. Pull that thing up as high as you can and crank out 2 sets of 20 of these on each side. One of the last things that I want to show you, which kind of integrates some of these things that we just looked at, is called a hip car, all right? And the way that I like to do this is I either hold on to like a stick or a wall for stability. Today I'm going to try to demonstrate this without using something for support. But again, this is all about controlling the range of these deep ranges of motion of the hip and teaching your neuromuscular system how to control these motions, okay? This one, like I said, kind of integrates a lot of these. The flexion, the internal rotation, and the extension of the hip. To do this, and these are a game changer. I've been doing these recently before I train legs. Huge game changer. Okay, I just do like 5 sets on each side. Even that produces a big difference. What you're gonna do is, again, hold on to something for stability. Slowly flex the hip up as high as you can by pulling the knee up. From here, you're going to abduct the hip off to the side like this as much as you can, all right? From here, you're gonna internally rotate the leg as much as you can by trying to lift the heel up, almost higher than the knee if you can. The whole time here, you're trying to stay as upright as possible too. The last step of this, let me kind of reposition so I don't kick the wall there. So we're in this deep abducted and internally rotated position. From here, you're gonna try to extend the leg back behind you, really squeezing the glute really hard, okay? And then bring it back, externally rotate, and adduct it back, and then lower. That's it. The whole point of this is you're deeply controlling every, point of this motion as you're doing this exercise. All right, it's very challenging. Move slow with it. This is all about increasing the mind-muscle connection with the hip musculature. So go slow, focus on contraction, and that's really it. 5 sets on each side. That's great to do as a follow-up to all these other things I showed you here today. It kind of integrates all of them. Again, something that I've been using personally, and it's been a huge game changer. One last time, we're flexing the hip as high as you can get it, abducting it off to the side. While it's off to the side here, internally rotating the leg by trying to lift the heel up, extending back, right? And then bringing it all back around and doing the whole thing in reverse. Try not to lean as much as I am. Holding onto a support really helps with this, but I really think that this is gonna help you guys out. So give this a shot and let me know how it goes. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then you're going to love my 3-day functional training split. This is a free workout available on my website. It's basically a 3-day workout plan that is designed to get you stronger and leaner while combating common mobility issues, flexibility issues, muscular imbalances, and postural misalignments. It's available for free. All you need to do to get that workout is open up the description down below, click the first link available there. That will take you over to my website where you can get that guide. If you're looking for another spot to get my free workout, you can click this link over here, and that will take you to that same spot on my website. Just click that. I'll ask you for your email and I'll send you a copy of that workout within 5 minutes. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you go ahead and do that over here. And if you want to see a video similar to today's video, check this video out over here. That's it for today. As always, I'll see you next time.